Do what? Go back to Zoom?
Yep.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's Friday. Sorry for the being a little up. It went back. I don't know why. There we go. Sorry to be a little tardy on the start here, but we're excited to share with you and chat with you. As we know, this has been a big week for everyone involved, for Chicago salons, for the rest of Illinois salons. Your first full week behind the chair with the salon reopened. Have heard wonderful things from many of you, and can't wait to share all the excitement as we hear back. There's a couple of legislative things that I wanted to be sure, even though we've posted them, I want to be sure that you're aware. And this has to do with Illinois guidelines. So I can't speak for Chicago on this, but I can speak for the state of Illinois. The rest of it, there were 2 updates to the phase 3 documents yesterday, and they were posted in several different places, including on our site. But one of the things that happened is that massages and body treatments, which originally were limited to 30-minute treatments, have now, that restriction has been removed. So I know that that's really good news. Also, facials and beard trims and shaves, that restriction has been removed. However, in all of those cases, with these changes that have been made, if the guest has to take off their mask in order to receive the service, then the service provider needs to not only, of course, keep their mask on, but they also either need to have goggles or a face shield on while they're delivering the service. So it's really good news all the way around, and they're telling us how you need to execute that service as well for the guest. So that's great news. Also, today, the president signed what's called the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act. And so that's an update. It's one that we've been kind of expecting. It had passed earlier this week. I think we put everything online as well, but I just want to review that with you. The key things about this piece of legislation is that the forgiveness piece, the covered period, has extended from 8 weeks to 24 weeks.
Good.
So I know that there were many salons that were very concerned about, what do we do with this? It's 8 weeks, and for most of that time, I've remained closed. You know, and then you were balancing your forgiveness on your number of employees, and it was really a lot of gray area. So I'm going to go over what this Flexibility Act that was signed today does for all of you. Extension of the date, any loan payments will not begin until after the lender receives notification of forgiveness from the SBA. So in other words, if you're on a 24-week plan to bring people back and use the funds and then submit for forgiveness, until SBA comes back and says, you are forgiven X, and there's a balance remaining, that's when the loan payments would begin, still at the 1%. There's another part of it that says, originally, there was a 75-25 rule, which said that 75% of the funds had to be used for payroll. They had to be used for payroll. And 25% could be used for rent or utilities and things of that nature. They have changed it now to 60-40. So 60% has to be used for payroll. However, here's the caveat, and this is different. If you spend less than 60% of the funds on payroll, nothing will be forgiven. Whereas in the previous time, they would have still forgiven a certain amount if you fell under the 75%. And they would have converted the rest to a loan. In this case, if you spend less than 60%, so they've lowered the amount you have to spend on payroll, but if you hit less than that, there will be no forgiveness whatsoever.
Is the owner's payroll considered part of that 60?
It depends on how they're set up.
Okay.
If they were set up in advance as a payroll employee, then the chances are yes, that's where the accountants come in, and I would say get your opinion from your accountant. If you're an LLC, if you're a corporation, if you're a sole proprietorship, all of that is going to influence. So just be sure you get the right answer. All right, the next thing is it defers the date to December 31st that a borrower can have, December 31st of this year, that a borrower can have to restore full-time equivalents and employee compensation at the same threshold. So what that means is, you put in on your enrollment, on your application document, you put in the number of full-time equivalent employees that you had. Whatever that number was, it was on your application. You now have up until December 31st to be back at that number and hit that compensation threshold. But here's the other thing that's a plus here. We said the one thing that was a minus is if you spend less than 60% of the funds on payroll, you're not going to get any forgiveness. You're not going to be treated negatively if you come in with less full-time equivalent employees. Okay.
Say that again. Just repeat that and give an example what you mean.
So let's say that on your document, you said you had 10 full-time equivalent employees, 10 people. And you're getting down to, you've got now till December 31st, but your business, you've only built back up to 8 people. In the old PPP, as it was originally crafted or written, you would have been penalized for not bringing back everybody. Now, that's not the case. You're not going to be penalized for that. So you literally could have the same amount of payroll or compensation with fewer employees. The threshold remains the same, but you could have fewer employees on the payroll.
Okay.
So it says here again, which I just said, the loan forgiveness will not be reduced as a result in the decline of full-time equivalents employees in some situations. The PPP loan borrower may or can receive additional payroll tax deferral. So that again is a accountant thing that you're going to want to work on with your accountant. I know that when I read when I read the document itself, it was still talking about more information needed to be provided on that particular topic. So we'll await that from the SBA. But in the meantime, I think overall, very, very good news, especially for salons, because you're just now getting back to work. Don't know really what you did with the PPP, whether you did it to, whether you put it intact while the salon was closed, or whether you waited until the salon came back. The initial deadline was June 30th. Now it goes through December. It goes all the way to the end of the year. So that's a plus. Any way you look at it, that's a plus. So those are the guidelines things. We're still expecting more updates on the phase 3 guidelines. So this is separate from the payroll protection program and the new act that was signed today. But the governors, the Restore Illinois and the mayor's Be Safe Chicago plan, there will be updates, additional updates that clarify some things, mostly for schools. There's some information that has to come in yet for cosmetology, barber schools, massage schools, aesthetic schools, things of that nature. And we're expecting some additional information on that through either today or certainly early next week. So all in all, I think we've had a terrific week on a lot of fronts. We've had a week that also, I think, has made us all look inward, has made us all think about where do we really stand on equality? Where do we really stand on people? You know, I'll give you an example. There was a long time for me that when I heard Black Lives Matter, I thought, well, sure they do. And so do all lives. But I didn't realize really what was fully being said with Black Lives Matter. And I think that this whole change has to start with us. It has to start one at a time internally for all of us, and changing the way we look at our neighbors, the way we look at our fellow people. And certainly there's no place for prejudice. There's no place for racism. There's no place for a lack of understanding. And yet there has been plenty of place for all of that in the country we live in. Certainly, I can't say that I have, the thing that keeps coming to my mind, and I may have said this the other day, but when I really think about the difference in a conversation that an African-American father needs to have with his children as they're growing up and before they leave the house, is totally different than the conversation that we would have to have with our children. And you know, until you really grasp that, I don't think we can move in the direction that we need to really bring about equality. Equality means equality. It means that our conversations should be the same. It means that we shouldn't have any more fear, that you shouldn't have any more fear to encounter a police officer than the next person. It means that you shouldn't have any more fear of being rejected from a job than the next person. There's just so much that we have to learn yet. And I think the big difference this time is that we're at a point where we're willing to open up our hearts and our minds and look at this in a different way and truly learn from what has happened and move forward as a people. And that's what I think is so important. And again, there's no judgment on anyone who's at a different spot. It's only from an individual spot that we need to do the work. And once we've done the work, then we can ask people, what really do you need? How can we help? It absolutely starts with that personal understanding and that personal desire to move forward. So that's all I wanted to say on that at this point. I don't feel intelligent enough to really go further with that conversation other than for me personally. And just know that we stand with all of you. We stand with all of us on equality. And certainly I will never read the hashtag or the phrase or the t-shirt or the sign, Black Lives Matter, in the same way that I did prior to the last 2 weeks. So thank you for all of you that have persevered, your persistence, your want and desire and need to move forward. So we're with you and we'll be with you. All right. So other than that, Terri, what's on your mind today?
Oh boy. I don't know. While you were talking just now, I thought something my mom used to always say, you know, I don't think we have a prejudice bone in our body. And I know she didn't have one in hers. But what she would say is, you know, unreasonable behavior is what creates chaos. And so how we respond during all of these situations, if our first response is going to be that shield of whether it's sarcasm or hate, it's going to fuel anger. And instead of saying, I want to understand, help me to understand. And those are the kind of things I'm thinking about right now. So
it's just those things that when something starts to stir inside of you, look inward and ask questions. Be curious as to why you're having some of the feelings that you're having. Be curious as to why someone might respond in a way differently than you, and try and understand where that really is coming from. I know that with all of this, there are, again, many voices, many leaders, many people that have something to say. And so you'll hear about this from many.
As you should.
Yeah. And the great thing is that there's conversation, right? Conversation, not just in homes, conversation, not just between an African-American mom or dad with their children, or not just within an Italian-American, a Polish-American, a Croatian, that not just those conversations, but that we're having them together. And we're looking at what piece of this do I own personally, and what do I need to change, and how can I ask God to help with that change for me personally. And I think that's just so important. It's important that we're having these conversations, and so we invite them. We honor all of our friends, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their beliefs. We don't have to agree with everything that we hear, but we need to be respectful, and we need to honor their right to feel that way. And so I know that this is generally a time where we're talking about how do we help you come back from the coronavirus and COVID-19? How do we help you work on the financial side of your business to survive and be able to thrive and employ people? I will also tell you that I think that there's more conversations happening right now with your landlords than there has been during this. I know that it certainly is our case with our schools. I just got off a call with one of our landlords and have already been on a call with another. And I'll tell you that there wasn't a whole lot of conversation during this 2.5, 3 month time where we were closed. But now it's relevant. It's a relevant conversation, and it's relevant on both sides, because as a lessee, we want to know, how are you going to deal with this, with the time that's passed? We know it's not your fault. It certainly isn't our fault that these businesses were closed. And while we might want to blame the governors that closed all of the businesses, it's not their fault either. They made the best decision they could for all of us. So we've got to gather around the table. We've got to be ready to have those conversations. So what I would, and they should be easy to have, to be honest with you, easy to gather your information. So what would I gather if I was you? I would gather the difference. First of all, I would say, what did you do? What volume did you do during the time, the same time frame, by month or by week in 2019? And what did you do this year in 2020 during that same time frame? And don't just look at service revenue. Look at service revenue. Look at your retail or take-home dollar revenue. Anything that brings revenue into your business that stopped or was significantly hampered as a result of it. And then you have to decide, how do you think it will ramp back up? Will it ramp back up immediately? I've talked to some people, in the salon business who say we're doing pre-closure numbers already with less hours, so our productivity is higher. Okay, that may not be everyone. Remember, in our two-state map, it can be very different. What happens in the rural areas
that we service, that we
right. Yeah, I mean, it can be very different. So be straight up. They're going to want to know, how do you expect it, which is crystal balling, but you don't know. I would be conservative with how you expect it to recover. Do you expect to be back at full dollars, full pre-closure dollars, your first month back for June? Or do you expect to be at 50%? It's fair to say in the suburbs, if we're at 50% occupancy, will we be at 50% revenue? If we're in Chicago at 25% occupancy,
exactly,
will we be at 25% revenue? And then you can estimate when you're going to be into phase 4, where those occupancy rates will go up, and take your same numbers there. You can use your 2019 comparative, and you can say, okay, if I'm at 25% of X, this is what we're expecting. Now, if you blow those numbers away, great, you'd be happy to pay the rent, but you're protecting yourself. Now, some of the options that you have on your rent is you've got to decide those 3 months that went by. Have you paid them? Did you already pay them? Have you not paid them at all? And is your landlord, if it's a national company, it's going to take one approach. If it's a local person who has strip malls and centers and things like that, they're going to take another approach. If it's someone who just invested in one single location, they're going to take another approach. But how are you, what it always comes down to, and this is what was said again today, there is no one size fits all for this conversation. It certainly isn't going to be the same for you and a dry cleaner. It's not going to be the same for you in a hardware store. It's not going to be the same for you in a floral shop. And those might be all of the things that are around you, or you in a pizza company. Some businesses were able to maintain 80% of their volume, 90% of their volume, or some even did more volume during the shutdown. Salons were shut down. You had a little bit of volume with curbside pickup.
If you did it, yeah.
If you did. And so what we have to do is draw out a nice picture of what happened. It's not going to be a nice picture, but list what happened to your volume, where you're at.
Well, and you know, one of the things that the landlords could ask is, did you apply for the PPP?
They all ask that, Terry. The two that I spoke to, they asked that. It's one of the first questions.
Well, and the reason they're asking that is because that was taken in consideration of your formula. So where do you suggest they go with that conversation?
Well, the conversation is that when that was determined, that's why they're switching it around now. That's why there was adjustments that have been made to it, is that some people went through their PPP loan all for payroll, all of it. Didn't even cover utilities, didn't cover rent, didn't cover anything, because they were intent on keeping their people employed and not having them on unemployment. And so that money was blown through. Still, even if everything worked perfectly according to plan, we've got to be able to look forward and say, these next 6 months are not going to be particularly easy months in business. So you're not just talking with your landlord about the previous 3 months. You're talking about the balance of 2020. And really the goal is to be back on our feet fully by 2021 sometime. I talked with a salon owner yesterday who didn't feel that the country would get back on its feet fully in his lifetime. He felt that the depth of this crisis is so unbelievable that you know, he didn't see it coming back fully for the next 20 years. Now, whether that's true, whether that's not true, we're not talking 20 years, but we are talking through the end of this year. So what are some things that you could do? You could either ask for rent forgiveness during the time that you were closed, or you could ask for rent reduction, both for the time you were closed and for the balance of this year. Or you could ask for rent deferral, which, for sake of example, let's say you went to a landlord and said, I would be willing to extend my lease by 1 year at its current rate if you will forgive 6 months of rent.
So it's really could be a combination of all of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, sometimes I think that salon, especially, I mean, large salon owners, you don't have a problem with this, but a lot of small salon owners, the kind that make up our industry, you're the fabric, you're the people that we do business with. You're looking at what do I do and what do I have the right to ask for? And
anything.
Yeah, everyone says we're on uncharted waters, right? We've never been here before. You've never had your business closed for 3 months before. And so talking with your landlord, don't ignore them, talk with them. If possible, face-to-face or over a Zoom call or Ring Central like this, where they can see you. I mean, the fact of the matter is that they're going through a hard time too, right? It's like the person I talked to today, he's got 80 people that lease in that one location, and 80 of them have a different scenario. So they've got to come up with 80 different workouts based on what's going to, they do want you to stay alive, right? They want you to keep paying rent. They don't want to make a decision today that's going to cause you to close your doors, and then they've got to find a whole new tenant. So there's a vested interest on both parts. Mm-hmm. And if we talk to them, again, like human beings, if we stand our ground where it's needed to stand your ground, this is what I can do. I think you're going to get there, but don't think that by ignoring it, it's going to take care of itself, because it won't. Mm-hmm. Right? We've got to talk to those landlords. If you need help on this, talk to your accountant, talk to your lawyer, talk to other salon owners and what they have been able to work out with their.
Well, and you know what, this is really a tough topic, because we've said from the platform for years, create a relationship with your landlord. And some of you are saying, I don't know how to talk to them because we really don't have a relationship. Well, guess what? This is going to jumpstart a conversation. You have to have one regardless. And also, you can see his intentions as landlord, and you can give your intentions as a tenant, you know? So I think that's important. Mm-hmm. I mean, I wouldn't want to have a conversation if I haven't spoken to my landlord in 3 years and now I have to have a conversation. That's a little awkward. Mm-hmm. But it's expected, and it's necessary.
And also expect the conversation to be at the same level that it was. If you haven't talked to him in 3 years, the relationship you have is what it was 3 years ago, plus or minus however you have paid them up until now. Mm-hmm. If you've got an excellent payment record, then you're going to have a little bit more flexibility on both sides. If they've had to chase you every month for your rent, then you're not going to have as much flexibility. It's just the way that it works. It is a relationship economy. And as much as we like to think, okay, that's just an agent for a big company, it's still about relationship. Mm-hmm. I can tell you things that, even your relationship is with all of what surrounds you. I think back to what one of our salon owners did and how they, in reopening, they had a sign shop next to them, and they did all their signage with the sign shop to support a fellow business in a strip mall, right? In a strip center, not a strip mall, but a strip center. And it's just, how can you make the best community footprint as you come back? Because I think that's what's important. How is what you're doing spreading out and honoring your community, your city, the people in the city? And I think that we're moving in the right direction. A lot of good things are happening. So there's a couple of business things from PSC standpoint that I wanted to mention. One is that our space location here in Rockdale, Joliet, is reopening on Monday. Certainly there will be some new protocols in place. You're going to find the plexiglass that you see different places. You're going to find temperature being taken, a single-use mask being required for you to come in, that we will provide hand sanitizer, all of the things that you'll find places, walkways that are going to be protected, and we're protecting you and our staff. We've installed in our restrooms, we've installed as much touch-free, touchless as possible. The touchless sinks are in, the touchless towel dispensers are in. Much has been accomplished throughout this time. We still will be offering curbside pickup for anyone who's more comfortable with that. We're going to continue to offer that until there's no interest in it. So we're happy to continue to provide curbside. But as of Monday, if you want to come back in and actually shop or walk the premises, you're able to do that.
And we're only going to have one entrance.
Yes. Everyone that comes in the building comes in through one door. The other thing is that we have encountered this week, because of some of the protests and some of the, not so nice protests. So there are two kinds, right? Because of some of the streets have been shut down, our deliveries by UPS have been delayed. Not in all cases, in some cases. So please be understanding if you can, but also, should this continue, you need to make that plan on your orders. Plan further ahead. Give a little bit extra time if that's needed. Don't run your inventory so close that if that driver doesn't show up at his usual time on his usual day with your PSC order, that you're going to be okay. We don't want you to be without color. And we don't want you to be without products, because you know what? That's one of the ways. I saw a beautiful sign. I want to read it to you. One of our consultants sent it in from a salon. And it said, the most asked question that they received during this time is, what can I do to help? And here's what they wrote. And it says, thank you for asking. Purchasing your take-home products from us makes a big difference. Ask your stylist what you can take home today. You make a difference. And it's kind of nice. It's a nice, because clients do want to, guests do want to know, what can they do for you? How can they help you? And if we ask, again, if we say, this is what you can do, they probably will, because they always do. So I'm about finished with what I wanted to say. We're going into a weekend. We've finally gotten some summer weather.
Did we have any challenges of any questions people have for what they went through this week? Is this a handsome boy coming in?
He is.
Boy, my two boys need a haircut, and so does the mother.
Yes.
Yeah.
When are you going to get a haircut?
We'll get ready to sign off.
Hi. I'll see you when we're at home, my sweetie mama.
Oh, thank you, my gorgeous. But Did they have any questions or any hardships with customers or anything this week? No questions.
I'd be willing to bet that most of our audience right now is behind the chair. Loving,
Jackson.
Jack. Loving what they're doing. And most will probably watch this later. So we'll try and watch our feed later on tonight. If you have questions, please ask them. If you feel like they're personal and maybe they have to do specifically with the PPP loan, please send them by direct message. So we're just talking to you.
Jackson, tell everyone to enjoy their good luck with their first weekend. What are you doing?
His canker sore. Can you believe it? He's 13.
Yeah, eating all those sours. But tell everyone to have a great weekend.
Have a sweet weekend, you sweeties.
Okay, phone's ringing here.
All right.
Goodbye.
Thanks so much. Everyone have a great weekend. We love you.
Bye.